Hello everyone, my name is Gabriel, and today I will be showing you the beginning of a chat app I made in Java. My first step was to implement the scanner class that will allow me to obtain user input. An object is created from the scanner class called user input. This object will allow us to make use of the methods in the scanner class to read the user's input. Within the main method, the user is asked to enter a username. The username has restrictions. It must contain an underscore and be no more than 5 characters long. The underscore should also separate your first and last example, br_th. We now look into the login class. This class is responsible for the main methods of the app. The variable username, all lowercase, is set as a private variable, meaning it can't be modified outside the class. Now, as we can see, a parameterized constructor is responsible for assigning the values passed as parameters to the object's fields. This .username is the object's field, and it is assigned the value captured in main to the object's field. Public boolean check username is a non-static method, meaning the method belongs to the object. It uses the object's fields to work. The boolean method makes use of if statements to verify the user's input. The condition in the if block tells us that if the user's input doesn't have an underscore or is greater than 5, return false to main. String square brackets indicates that we're defining a variable that will hold an array of strings, that variable being parts. Parts is assigned to the this.username.split and an underscore as an argument in the split method. Split method is responsible for dividing the first and the last name of the string stored in the this.username field. The underscore is what split method uses to separate index 1 and index 2 of the array. The first part square bracket 0 is the first name that is stored in the parts variable. 0 indicates the index of the string in the array. Therefore, 0 is the first name in the array of string. Parts 1 would then be the following string in the array, that being the last name. The next line of code is parts.length equals 2 as the condition in the if statement. This is a method that is part of the parts variable array that checks how many different strings are in the array. If correctly inputted by the user, there should be 2 strings in the parts variable. Therefore, the exclamation and equal means if there are not 2 strings in the array, return false. The next line of code is another if statement using the matches method to check if a regex matches the string in index 0. Regex can be defined as characters that are selected to be used by a method to test if they match certain characters in a string text. The character dot means any character and plus means one or more of a character. Therefore, the 2 vertical lines or the OR operator indicates that if the first name and last name don't have at least 1 character and that character can be any character, then return false. The next 3 lines define that this dot first name is equal to parts 0 and parts 1 of the array. The next method is to display a message in main. It checks if the result of check username was either true or false and returns the following statements based on the result. True, username successfully captured. False, username is not correctly formatted. Please ensure that your username contains an underscore and is no more than 5 characters in length. This method is then called in main. We move on to the password method, where the user is asked to enter a password that is at least 8 characters long, contains a capital letter, and contains a special character. The input is captured as password. The Boolean method check password complexity is used to return the result. The following pattern and matcher classes will need to be implemented to make use of the regex and checking the regex. The first line in the method is used to create the regex that is assigned to the object stored in the variable special character. Pattern being the class and special character the variable that holds the regex. Pattern.compile means create this object that can be assigned the following regex. This regex means define a pattern that is not lowercase letters or numbers, and pattern.case insensitive defines that the letters can be lower or uppercase. The next line uses the matcher class with similar syntax. Check special is a variable used to hold the object of matcher class. Check special is equal to the variable special character that undergoes a method called matcher that holds the string in password. The matcher method checks if the regex of special characters is equal to the string contained in password. The next line implements the same format, but this time it checks if the password contains a capital letter. Then the following contains digit variable is used to check if the regex matches the password. The regex being the password must contain a number. The last line returns the result of the method, either being true or false. .find uses the variable contains digit to check if there is at least one instance of the regex in the string held in contains digit. The .find method is used with all the matcher variables, check upper and check special. This .password length uses the length method to check the string is greater than or equal to 8. String display password is used to display the result of check password complexity method. Note, in main, the set password method is called because in the beginning of creating my object, the password had no value assigned to the object's fields. Set password updates this field with the value from the user. The next method is a string register user. It is used to output string based on whether the username was correctly formatted, incorrectly formatted, or both username and password met the conditions and now the username is registered. The string summary variable is used to display these messages. At first, the variable is assigned no string. By using the if statement, it checks if checked username is false or true. Then the not operator inverts the result. So for instance, if check username was true, it would be inverted to false, and then it would move on to the next line of code. If password was true, it would become false. Then we fall onto the summary.equals condition that defines if the variable equals nothing, we must display the two above conditions have met and that the user has been registered successfully. If the results were false, summary is returned to main with one or both of string messages. The user in main is asked to enter a cell phone number that contains an international country code, followed by a number that is no more than 10 characters long. The variable cell phone is assigned the string input from the user. In the login class, check cell phone number is a Boolean method that is used. The objects field this.cellphone uses the method .startsWith to check the input from the user starts with +27. The AND operator establishes that both conditions needs to be met. The object field uses the method .length to ensure the cell phone number is less than or equal to 13 characters. In main, the method setCellPhone is called. This method updates the value held by the object field this.cellphone and uses the replaceAll method to remove spaces, as a space could be counted as a character for our checkCellPhone method. The string displayCellPhone method is used to return the string output to main based on the output of checkCellPhone number method being true or false. The displayCellPhone method is then called in main. I proceeded to create a Boolean method in the login class called loginUser. It used the string parameters that passed into the method. I created two new variables in main, signInUser and signInPassword, to capture the user input. The role of this method is to test whether this.username and signInUser match, as well as signInPassword equals this.password. Therefore, determining that the entered user's password and the username before either equals the newly entered password and username when logging in. Either true or false is sent to main, and an if-else statement is used to state whether the user didn't input the correct details or to display a message containing the user's first and last name to welcome them. I need to make use of getFirstName and getLastName methods to obtain the first and last names inputted. This is due to encapsulation, where the get methods are used to read the private fields tied to the object, that being the first name and last name. Lastly, I made a string method called returnLoginStatus in the login class. This method uses the result of the loginUser method to display a message. If the username and password match, it returns a successful login. If they are false, it returns a failed login. Then in main, a simple print line method is used to display the result from the returnLoginStatus method. Now to test my code, I use JUnit testing. The name of the first method is username correctly formatted. This test is to check that the pass string value cow_1 into this constructor returns the correct information if it is formatted correctly. User1.checkUsername is a method call where the object calls the method. The purpose of this is to define the fields for the first and last name. Now, to test if my method works, I will be using the string result variable. This variable will hold the value of the first name and last name. Assert equals is used to determine the expected outcome and actual outcome. The expected outcome should be welcome cow, 1. It is great to see you again. That is then compared with the result, the actual outcome. Once we run this test, it should return true. This validates that cow_1 is correctly getting split into its first and last name, and the username complexity method is running as it's supposed to. Next method, testInvalidUsername message, checks if an invalid username displays the username incorrectly formatted message. The check username method is called by the object to validate the username. The actual outcome is again given the result variable, but this time the result variable is equal to the method display username message output, which would be a string. The expected and actual outcome are compared. This makes this test true. We move on to testing the password complexity method. A valid password is passed into the constructor. The result is equal to the user1.display method. Remember, user1.display method runs. It will first use the check password complexity method to check the password meets the requirements. The output string of the display method will be compared with the expected output and test equals true. The next test uses the same logic, but this time the password doesn't meet the complexity requirements. The actual result is compared with the expected string that is outputted from display password. The test the cell phone number method is similar to the other two, but result is equal to user1.display cell phone. The display cell phone method runs the check cell phone method to validate the passed number into the constructor is valid. The expected string is compared with the actual string and this test returns true. We move on to the final testing methods that use the assert true and assert false methods. The login valid method checks whether if both username and password are correct by passing a correct username and password into the constructor. The result is equal to the return either true or false from the login user method. Note, the passed values into the login user method must be the same values passed in the constructor. The assert true method checks if the result variable equals true. The login valid method uses assert false, but this time the login user method is given different values, making the result variable equal false. The username valid method passes a valid username into the constructor. The result variable is then equal to the return value of check username. Therefore, when assert true runs with the results in the parameter, the test outputs true. The username invalid method uses the same logic, but this time an invalid username is passed into the constructor. This makes the result variable equal false. Therefore, the test pass as assert false is used. Password valid and invalid use the same logic as the previous two methods, except the result variable is equal to output of the check password complexity method. The cell phone valid method uses the same logic. Instead, the result variable is equal to the output of check cell phone number method. Therefore, the test will pass. Cell phone invalid passes an invalid cell phone number in the constructor, and the assert false uses the result from the check cell phone method. If all expected and actual results are correct, all tests should run with no fails. you guys for watching. If you have any questions regarding the code, please ask them in the comment section below.